In the last lesson, we built a login module for our Vuetify dashboard app. In this lesson, we'll be learning how to find the right Vuetify component for your app, how to navigate the documentation, and how to leverage existing design patterns to maximize your productivity. Let's get started. In practically every application, they all share one component in common, the navigation bar. We need to add this to our sample app, so let's go over to the Vuetify docs to find what we need. When we land on the Vuetify page, we'll click on Documentation. Since we're looking for a component, we'll scan the left-hand side, and we'll notice that there is a UI component section. When we expand this section, we're going to see a lot of different components that Vuetify has pre-built for us. We're looking for a navigation bar, so this bar section here looks promising. When we expand the bar section, there is no navigation bar, but there is a component called app bars that sounds like a good fit because it indicates that it is meant for global use throughout the app. Let's explore the docs for it. When working with Vuetify components, there is no better place to learn how a component works than its docs page. With most components, the first section you'll see is the introduction. This is a paragraph that covers the purpose of the component, and although you are welcome to use the component however you see fit, this section provides some guidance on common usages and patterns to consider. The next section is the usage section, which describes the core functionality of the component and how it should be used. Some details you may find here include basic specifications, like responsive design sizes, or subcomponents that are generally used within the context of the component. In addition, it is always paired with a module that will make all the difference in your developer experience, the demo module. The purpose of the demo module is to allow users to interact with the demo of the component while also providing code samples. There are 4 primary functions. The first allows you to see what the component looks like in dark or light themes. The second allows you to play with the component in CodePen. The third one allows you to open the code in GitHub. And finally, we can view the source code. As you'll see, the code block has different headers that indicate different sections of the code. In this particular component, there is only a template section, but in a lot of other components, there will also be a script section, which will contain the JavaScript required for your demo to run properly when you're copying and pasting. In this demo's source code, we see 3 primary components that we need for our own app bar. VAppBar, which will be the wrapper for the component, VToolbarTitle, which allows us to define the title text for our navigation bar, and VButton, which will allow us to provide a call to action for users to click on. Let's jump into our code editor. We'll start by collapsing our login module that we built in the last lesson. Let's go ahead and add a comment just to make it easy to find later on. Then we'll add our VAppBar component and add our toolbar title. Again, this allows us to define the title of the navbar. Then we'll add our buttons for home and login. As you can see, the navigation buttons are bumping up close to the title. So we're going to use a component that we used earlier in the login module, VSpacer, which allows us to separate them, and this looks a lot better. The buttons are still stuck together, but don't worry, we'll learn how to fix that later. And as you'll notice, the app bar is overly large on our page at the moment. We'll need to learn how to configure it so that it is sized properly on our page. Let's jump back into the docs to learn how to do that. Another key section you'll want to know about is the API section. This section contains all the various properties and slots that are available to use when using a Vuetify component. As we scan through this list, the app prop looks really promising. As we read in the description, it designates the component as part of the layout, which automatically adjusts it for content sizing. Let's go ahead and apply this to our app. Back in our code editor, let's add the app prop. With the app prop, now our navigation bar is properly sized on the screen. However, it does overlap the login module. We will fix this in a bit, so don't worry about that for now. In the meantime, the app bar is looking a little bland. Just as we did for the buttons in the login module, let's add a color property of primary in order to give it a nice blue. The color contrast with the text could be better, so let's add a dark prop to make it easier to read. Much better. However, our login module is still being overlapped by our navigation bar. So let's jump into the docs and figure out how to fix this. In order to fix the overlapping that's happening, we'll need to go into the application component for Vuetify, which contains a lot of common components that you'll find in other Vuetify apps. As we read the description, the component that we're most interested in is the vContent component, which will help us ensure that everything is sized properly. Let's go ahead and add that to our app to see what happens. We'll go ahead and add our vContent and wrap that around our login module. Once we indent everything and save, voila! Everything looks exactly as we want. Now that our app bar and login module look great on the screen, let's go ahead and add a footer. As always, let's start by looking at the documentation. One of the most useful sections in Vuetify is the example section. The example section is useful for referencing common use case scenarios for the component. As we scroll down the different examples, the company footer looks really promising. Let's go ahead and copy that for our app. When we expand the source code tab, you'll see that when I hover in the upper right, a copy icon appears. By clicking this allows us to easily copy the entire block of code. Let's jump back into our code editor and paste our footer example. When we paste it, you'll notice that it includes the template element, but this is not necessary anymore since our single file component already has one. So let's delete that. Let's indent our footer component so that everything is aligned properly. Great, our footer is appearing. However, the links are missing, so let's figure out what's the problem. As we take a deeper look at the vFooter example we've copied and pasted, you'll notice two new components, vLayout and vFlex. For now, all you need to know is that they help to position the components to look correctly. We'll learn more about this in our layouts lesson later on in this course. You'll notice that on the V button, we have a for loop that is looking for a links data property, which we do not currently have. So let's go ahead and add that in. We'll add an array with strings home and login so that it'll match our header. Looks great. Now that our links are appearing, let's update the app name. Piece of cake. As you probably have noticed, the links in the navigation bar look differently than the ones in the footer, even though they're using the same V button component. If we inspect the V button closer in the footer, you'll see that there are two props on the footer buttons that we are not using in the app bar, text and rounded. Let's go to the docs to figure out what those props do. Using the API search functionality, we see that the text prop makes the background transparent, and the rounded prop applies a large border radius on the button, which we will only see when we hover over the button since the background is transparent. Let's go ahead and add these props to our app bar so that everything looks consistent. Back in our code, we'll go ahead and add text, and you'll see that everything's transparent. Once we've added the rounded prop, as you can see when we hover over, it appears as desired. Everything looks great. Congratulations! You have reached the end of Vuetify Components Part 1. In this lesson, you've learned how to navigate the docs to find the components you need, learn how to use them, and reuse design patterns to maximize your productivity. In the next lesson, we will be looking into more complex components to enhance our Vuetify dashboard app. See you there. In the next lesson, we will explore In the next lesson, we will explore more complex In the next lesson In the next sorry. Okay.